Bix Colleen, I believe is how to pronounce that character's name, played by Adria Arjona. Sorry, Adria. Again, if you're listening to the show, which I know you are, I apologize for if I'm butchering your last name.
You're listening to
Path of the Jedi
with your host, Ronnie Cruz.
All right, welcome to Path of the Jedi, the podcast where Star Wars meets personal development. My name is Ronnie Cruz, your host for this adventure of intrigue. Yes, that's right, intrigue. Okay, so not so much intrigue in like the spy versus spy or espionage sort of way. This is definitely doesn't feel like the glitz and almost glamorous side of intrigue, right? Like the 007 side. This is more of like the gritty, grimy side, right? This for me feels very much like a crime drama almost, right? When ordinary people, when regular people are caught in very, very difficult situations, and what they'll do when that happens, right? Obviously, the difficult situation here is the massive galactic conflict between the rebellion and the Empire, the tyrannical rule of the Empire. So, yeah, very much. Also too distinctly different from past shows we've seen in Star Wars, specifically and especially from you have Mandalorian and Boba Fett, which were pretty much space westerns, right? Very much fell into the Western genre in entertainment. This again falls, I think, more into that intrigue, that crime drama. So I'm very, very excited to have a completely different kind of show with a completely different feeling, and I love that they've also continued the style of storytelling, like from Obi-Wan, where it's one long. It's one continuous through story, right? As opposed to individual episodes have their standalone story arcs. This is kind of one long continual narrative. So it's incredibly fun to watch. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen the show yet, I would encourage you to go ahead and watch the show. There's 4 episodes as of this recording. There are 4 episodes that have been released, and they're not super long, so you can binge all 4 episodes. You can do it in one night, actually, realistically. So that way, I don't ruin anything for you here on Path of the Jedi, because I will be giving spoilers. I know it's been already a few weeks, so most people that are listening here on Path of the Jedi to the podcast will have probably already watched Andor. But in case you haven't, go ahead and watch it, because I will be giving some specific details, and I would hate for those details to ruin your fresh experience of the show. That said, I chose the word intrigue also because, even with the first 2 episodes, there's so much dark dealings, right? There's so many half-truths and secrets and lies being told, and that's really going to be the topic for today's show, for today's episode of Path of the Jedi, because I'm thinking about it and watching the show, like how much of it is necessity and how much of it is just by convenience, and then the ramifications of all of that, whether or not those lies and those half-truths and those secrets were even justified in the first place, right? What results, what happens as a result of not being forthcoming, of not being truthful. Before we get into that, however, I do want to talk a little bit about the show, because it's just been so incredibly fun. Even with just the first 2 episodes, we get again a completely unique and different part of the Star Wars universe that we haven't seen before, right? We get to see Andor's story and what the Star Wars universe looks like from his perspective, and because of that, again, it's so stylistically unique. All the shows have been amazing in that regard, right? And it speaks a lot to the care and just the level of detail that the creators are willing to put into each show, that stylistically the styles can also contribute to the larger narrative of each show. It decorates the show, and it tells the narrative in a way that is additive as opposed to just gets in the way, right? Like it's all seems very meticulously thought out and purposeful. And each show, for me anyways, has done that, and Andor is no different. We get more flashbacks in the show, which is awesome. Obviously, we want to get some of the early life of Andor and how he got to where he is when we meet him in the story. Yeah. Again, it's a strange situation. He's, I think I would guess preteen to early teen when we see him in the flashbacks, and as I mentioned in last week's show, he lives in a village with mostly youth. I didn't see any adults, and I still don't see any adults in their village, and so it's just kind of a weird situation. Then in this episode, in the flashback, they're actually going to scout out a ship that crashed on the planet, and as they're hiking over to the crash site, they pass a mining operation, right? And it looks like a massive strip mining operation. One can only guess that that's a corporation that's tied to the Empire or is doing contract work for the Empire. That's generally what happened in the imperial time, excuse me. They were contracting out corporations and large companies to basically strip different planets of resources to continue to grow the Empire, right? And so it seems to be that's what's happening in this particular planet that Andor is from, that Cassian is from. And my guess is that there aren't any adults in their village because all the adults have been either forced into labor or flat out kidnapped to work in those strip mines, right? And it would make sense. Like if they're looking for cheap labor, why not use the indigenous population? And if the indigenous population don't want to work, then of course they're going to be forced into it by the iron rule of the Empire. So that's my guess as to why there are no adults in Cassian's village. So again, it gives another really incredibly interesting layer to his story. Also, we get to meet Marva Andor, which mixed with when we have the story of from the flashbacks. We can guess that Marva, played by the amazing Fiona Shaw, by the way. We can guess that Marva is like his surrogate mother, right? Or like, his adoptive mother. We'll see where that story goes, but it was awesome to see and get introduced to another character, and we'll talk more about Marva a little bit later on in this show. Then we also meet Luthen Rael or Rael. I don't know how to really pronounce it. I'll say Rael. That makes more sense to me. Played by the amazing Stellan Skarsgård. I gotta love Stellan Skarsgård, man. He's amazing. I've loved everything that I've watched him in. His performances are always great, and he's so just versatile. Like as an actor, he's done so many different things that he just kind of pops up in films and TV shows that you would not that you wouldn't expect him in, but it's like drastically different performances every time. So I love seeing Stellan Skarsgård, and I love that he's part of the Star Wars universe now. Definitely kind of this man of mystery coming in out of from a whole different world. This mysterious stranger coming onto the planet. So I'm excited to learn more about Luthen Rael as the show progresses. Again, a lot of exciting stuff, and I love how this particular show really just kind of there's so many unanswered questions. It's already built on this web of lies, right? But there continues to kind of unfold. More questions arise. And so that's where I want to go with this conversation today, as we kind of examine this show Andor in its first two episodes. Lots of lies happening on so many different levels. Like and I don't know if it was purposeful, but it seems that there are zero truths happening with any of the characters that we have in this show so far. Right. So let's start with the relationship between Cyril Karn, who's kind kind of this security officer for this large, corporate conglomerate or whatever, and his chief, his boss, right, the chief of security, Chief Hine. Cyril Karn is played by Kyle Soller, I believe is how it's pronounced, or Solar, and then of course Chief Hine is played by Rupert Vansittart. Rupert, hopefully, if you're listening, I apologize. I apologize if you're listening, and I know you are. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Actually, I apologize to any actor who is listening to the show, and I know you are. I apologize if I've mispronounced any of your names. Anyways, the relationship between Chief Hine and Cyril Karn. Cyril has discovered the events that transpired the night before with Andor, with the two dead security officers, right? So he's on this quest to discover who was responsible, right? Obviously, there's two dead officers, and you want to get to the bottom of it and potentially bring the individual or individuals that perpetrated that crime, if there was a crime. You want to bring them to justice. And so Cyril Karn is on this quest, right? He brings this information to his chief, Chief Hine, who really, it's no secret. He makes no secret about it. He just wants to sweep it under the rug. And so there's lie. There's a lie number one, right? Like lie number one in today's conversation. So there's this pretty heinous crime of potentially murder. Obviously they need to do more investigating and get to the bottom of what actually happened. But very quickly, and without even second thought, Chief Hine wants to go ahead and just sweep it under the rug, right? And so I'm looking at this as it's a lie of expedience and convenience. I think as a result of all the bureaucratic red tape and ass kissing that's really, I think, really fomenting with the empire and the imperial sympathizers. All the corporations and everything else that are under contract with the empire. Just to save face or to make things look good, sweep the things under the rug that aren't necessarily, going to be a deal breaker, right? Like we can move on with our day. Let's for quote unquote the greater good. Let's just make up the story and let's leave sleeping dogs. I think is what the saying is, right? Leave sleeping dogs where they lie. The truth is, Chief Hine, in his assessment of the situation, wasn't too far off. I mean, like he already had guessed. His guess was that the two security officers were in the wrong part of town and doing wrong things and that things that they shouldn't be doing. And got mixed up with the wrong kind of people and got themselves killed as a result, right? He having known kind of the history of those two deceased security officers, he knew that they probably deserve it, or at least got themselves into trouble that they couldn't get out of. So instead of going through all the trouble and red tape of the investigation, especially right now when the empire is coming down to do their periodical what's it called, assessments, right? Let's just not talk about it. Let's just sweep it under the rug as an accident and move about our day so we can get through this evaluation with the empire without any problems, right? That's the last thing they want. So it's kind of like cover our asses and give them a good story, right? Because we don't want to stir up anything with the empire. So again, I get it. It's a lie out of expedience, which Cyril Karn does not accept at all. All right, Cyril obviously defies the order and goes to do the investigation himself anyways, right? Like he enlists because he's in a position to, he enlists all his underlings to continue forth with the investigation, which is itself a lie on Cyril's part. I mean, clearly, the chief told him not to investigate any further and just to create a cover story for whatever his motivation is. I mean, obviously, in real life, you want to solve these kind of crimes and mysteries. However, there was definitely, like, whatever Cyril's motivation is, he's clearly being dishonest, and as a result, we'll just just see how far it goes, right? In the next couple of episodes, what is he willing to do, and how far is he willing to take this lie, and how confident is he that he'll actually be able to bring the perpetrators to justice? Like Cyril is a hard one to read with just these first two episodes. I mean, it seems like he has this this kind of rigid desire to follow the rules and do things because they're morally correct and right, and rule of law is the thing, but at the same time, is he just jockeying for advancement, right? Like he definitely has. I mean, in the first episode, he says that he slightly altered his uniform so that it's more form fitting, so that it's fits a little better, so that it's a little bit more style. What's the word I'm looking for? Stylish. Golly, I don't know why I had a brain fart on that one. Senior moment. Anyways, my point is, there's kind of conflicting things about the character of Cyril Karn. What we do know again is that there are some lies and some half truths being perpetrated by him, and so we'll discover not only more of his background, I'm sure, but where and how far this particular lie that he's perpetrating will go. Now, moving on to another pair of characters, we go to Bix Colleen, I believe is how to pronounce that character's name, played by Adria Arjona. Sorry, Adria. Again, if you're listening to the show, which I know you are, I apologize for if I'm butchering your last name. So Adria plays Bix, who is a friend of Cassian Andor's. And then we have her kind of side piece, Tim Carlo, the character by the name of Tim Carlo, played by James McArdle, right? That's an easier last name to pronounce. Thank you, James. James McArdle. And so there's clearly a lot of unspoken things happening between these two characters. There's definitely a relationship. It's definitely a working relationship, right? They work together in whatever the situation is. I think it's kind of like I don't know. It's some kind of junk yard / pawn shop situation, scrapper. Like they sell and trade, scraps and things like that, right? Refurbished tech and mechanic goods. Anyways, Bix and Tim clearly have a working relationship, number one, and there's clearly also, especially in the second episode, there's clearly more than that, and I think it's different for each person in the relationship. For Bix, it definitely seems like a friends with benefit kind of situation, right? There's definitely a physical intimacy in the relationship, but there's not an emotional intimacy, right? Like it's just for that convenience. Tim obviously I think has more feelings beyond that, and here's the thing, right? Like they've communicated as such. I think there's an understanding between the two that they've got an arrangement just once a week, I don't know, like, okay, so this is just an aside, which is a completely separate topic that we could explore in future episodes. But relationships like that it's just kind of a physical arrangement. Rarely ever. I mean, they may start off like, okay, this is a great idea, let's do that, but it rarely ever works out where that both parties continue to just feel that way, right? Like that's going to be a great arrangement in the long term. Inevitably, one person in the relationship will feel more of an attachment than the other, right? So yeah, I mean, in real life and in fiction, I've never personally seen that pan out and work out for anybody. So I just want to put that out there in case you're thinking about that. And if you have a perfectly great physical relationship that is just of convenience and there's no deeper emotional connection and it's working out in the long term, let me know, because you will be the first. Anyways, neither here nor there. Clearly, again, Bix isn't as emotionally invested or at all emotionally invested. It seems like it in the relationship, and I think there's definitely a lot that she's hiding from Tim. I mean, just her relationship with Cassian alone seems suspicious already, and keeping things like that from Tim is well. I mean, I think from her standpoint, it's a necessity because it keeps not only Cassian and her safe, but it also, I think, there's part of it that keeps Tim safe as well. The less he knows, the better off he's going to be, because who wants to mix up anybody else in this world of intrigue and potentially, well, you could get caught and you could be in a lot of trouble. So yeah, for Tim's sake, let's just say that she's sparing him, from complete honesty and what's going on. And I mean, maybe there's just a lack of communication between the two. But here's the thing about communication, right? Communication is hard enough as it is, right? Like it's hard from both the receiver and the person that's communicating, right? The giver. Both sides of the interpersonal communication are incredibly intricate, and there's lots happening beyond just even the verbal communication. There's nonverbal, which accounts for a majority, way more of the communication than the verbal part. You got to read in between the lines, as they say, and so whether even though Bix isn't communicating stuff to Tim. Tim is definitely reading some things, and here's the thing, there's that subtext that you can read, and it goes even okay. In honest communication, there's always subtext that's underlying, right? There's always, again, you read the body language, you read the nonverbal cues. What happens then, it makes it even more complicated when you're talking about lying, right? Again, it's hard, it's difficult enough from the receiver end to interpret honest communication. What more if it's dishonest communication, right? You have to try to interpret so many things. And so from Tim's standpoint, I could totally understand that his mind is going to race off into so many, it could just go in so many different directions, and suspicion grows and grows and grows because he's not going to know what story is real and what to make from Bix's communication because Bix isn't being forthcoming. We'll see this pan out in the future coming episodes, but it just makes things complicated, right? Obviously, especially in a physically intimate relationship, being untruthful is really, really dangerous, really, really dangerous. And that's why I say, with especially these kinds of arrangements, it's tough, man. It is really, really tough to pull off. Even with honest communication, it's even tougher to pull off with dishonesty. We'll see what happens. The imbalance will really just come to a head, I think, between these two. So again, we see how these lies are affecting the lives of these people. So just with these two examples, right, with Chief Hine and Cyril Karn, with Bix Colleen and Tim Carlo, we really got to start asking the question: is the conflict that they're stuck in between, right? Are these individuals who are caught in this conflict between the Empire and the Rebellion, this massive galactic conflict, are they lying out of necessity, right? Are they forced into dishonesty? Are they forced into telling these fabricated truths as a result of the circumstances? And so that's a question we really have to explore, and we'll get into that in just a little bit, because we also, of course, have to include in the conversation our title character, our main guy, Cassian Andor. Now, Cassian's top to bottom, we don't really know that much about him. I mean, I'm glad, yes, we are getting some of his background with the flashbacks, but it's such a distant flashback that there's a lot of blanks that need to be filled in, and of what we know, we definitely know in these first two episodes, a lot of it is not true, right? A lot of it is not true. If you look at his relationship basically to everybody. In the first episode, he asked his coworker to lie, right? In all interactions, really, now that I think about it so far, that we've seen, he hasn't been forthcoming at all. And sure, maybe it's a direct result of whatever mission or thing that he's trying to accomplish right now. So again, it goes back to the question: are these characters, are these individuals forced into into, making up these false narratives, just to navigate their way around this conflict that the entire galaxy has been thrust into. When you look at his relationship with Marva Andor, his surrogate mother, you see that they've together have fabricated his history, his backstory. I mean, they say, on the record that he's from a planet called Fest, when he's really from Canary. We see the planet where he's, in the village with all the other children. There's a lot of that we really have no idea about. And I guess, like seeing their interaction in this particular episode, it's for their protection, it's for their safety. But at the same time, Cassian does have a pretty extensive criminal record, right? A criminal record. The criminal record does say that he's from Fest, but even knowing that he has a criminal record, like there's a lot that we know that both Cassian and Marva together have to hide. And so, yeah, I mean, like, again, is like, clearly it's for their own safety, and clearly the planet that they're currently on is allowing that safety and is allowing them to live in relative anonymity. But I mean, obviously it's coming to haunt them. How the question then is, how long can you hide from a lie? How long can you hide from a half truth before it eventually catches up to you, right? And okay, so I know this is only the second episode, but I mean, those are big questions. Those are really, really huge questions that speak a lot to where Cassian's life is right now, right? Like we get this kind of not carefree, but we get this almost innocence in the very first flashback with them in the village of children, and it's a stark contrast to where Cassian is in the present time, at least of this particular storyline, where it's like there's so much running and hiding and things that are happening behind closed doors. And really, this is such an important conversation to have for this particular show, because it rests on all of this thematically, right? Like the theme of lies and secrets and half-truths, it permeates the entire show. And it's actually, like, from what I've seen thus far, it's built on it, right? It's built on it. If we trace back to the first episode of the show, we have a scene where Cassian is having a conversation with his android, B2EMO, or B2EMO, as I like to call him, and he asks the android, he asks B2, he says this is the quote: "I know it takes a lot of energy, but can you make a lie for me?" This one quote is so layered, and it's has so much depth to it, that I mean, I had no idea when I first heard it how much depth, but I knew that when I very first heard it that I wanted to talk about it, and seeing now the second, third, fourth episodes, it really again, it's the thematic foundation of the show for me. Well, obviously, it takes a lot of energy to lie. We could just talk about that, right? Making the lie, first of all, telling the initial lie, it takes a lot of energy, because I don't know, I mean, unless you're like a sociopath, it's not a natural thing to just make up stories, right? Make up falsities, and then the added energy, though, to continue to perpetrate that lie, to keep that story going, like that's what I mentioned earlier. Eventually, you don't know how these things are going to catch up to you, and the energy it takes to just keep up with it is incredible. The conversation, again, going back to the conversation between Andor, Cassian, and Marva, they're trying to figure out, okay, so who have you told that you're not actually from Fest? Like, who among your circle of people have you told that you're from Canary? And so they both have to kind of think back to, the number of years that they've been telling this lie. And like, I don't know who I told. I don't think I told anybody. I've not told anybody officially, but obviously it got out somehow. Like, and so, like, again, to juggle that level of falsehood, it takes an incredible amount of urgency up front to tell the lie in the first place. But again, to continue that story, to continue to perpetrate that lie, I mean, it's impossible to keep up with. And that's why, we see that it's already starting to catch up with Cassian. And then beyond that, like beyond the actual quote itself and the truth behind that quote, it's so incredibly telling that it's coming from Cassian. I don't know of a single character in the Star Wars universe that understands that particular sentence as deeply and profoundly as Cassian Andor. I mean, we see that his entire life has been built on lies and falsehoods and secrets. And so for that sentence, for that quote to come from him, I know that it takes a lot of energy to lie. Right? From that to come to Cassian really, really says a lot about him, really says a lot about his story, really says a lot about, without going into details, really says a lot about what he's gone through in his life. And we see that really kind of unfolding. And it's such a amazing, really, again, profound and deep peek into his psyche, into his mindset, and into what he's gone through, right? Like into Cassian's head. So yeah, I mean, it's really like, just talking about it makes me feel so heavy, and it makes me feel so sad for Cassian. And yeah, you just feel the weight of what he's had to do, and the energy that he's had to expend living the life that he's lived thus far, with all these falsehoods, with all these lies. So I mean, if there's any lesson, well, I don't know, like we live in a world where well, I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong or right. I think we all can agree that they're lying. We shouldn't lie, but I will also be realistic in saying that I think everybody lies to some degree, whether it's a white lie or a little a little harmless falsity. We just let those out every once in a while, and I think thankfully most of those things are harmless and meaningless, but like, what's the point then? What's the point? And then of course, if you get to kind of like the bigger kind of falsehoods and stories, narratives that you're perpetrating, is super dangerous. Again, I mean, from an energetic standpoint, it takes a lot of energy, unless again you're a sociopath and it's just easy for you to do so. For average everyday majority of the people, it takes a lot of energy, because it's not something that we naturally do, I don't think. And then to keep the bigger lies going, well, I mean, you see the weight that Cassian is carrying. So really, I'm not going to make a judgment on whether lying is wrong or right. I have my own take on it, but I think the question that I would pose to everybody here on the show today is the lie that you've told or are about to tell worth the weight and the burden that you're going to have to carry? For Cassian, we're going to have to wait and see. All right, well, that's going to do it for today's episode. Wowzers. Lies of expedience and convenience, lies of omission, lies of necessity. Is there such a thing? What do you guys think, man? What do you guys think? I think this is, I don't know. I love, again, the depth of the storytelling in this show and in all of Star Wars. It really gets my brain cooking, man. And I love seeing this angle of Andor that I've never seen before. I never really thought of just the level of burden and weight that he's had to carry all this time. You just see him from Rogue One, and you see him as a soldier having to do what he believes he's had to do. But then on top of that, we're now seeing again the incredible weight that he's had to carry all his life, and why he is who he is by the time we see him in the Rogue One movie. So incredible show so far, man. I'm having a great time watching it. I can't wait to continue this discussion. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think. If you have thoughts about today's topic and the theme that we've discussed on the show, let me know. Hit me up on the socials. It's POTJ Podcast on both Twitter and Facebook. And, of course, you can message or send an email to us at info@pathofthejedi.com. Put the title of today's episode in the subject heading, and let me know what you think about lies, right? Or if you have any experience with lies, or know somebody that has perpetrated any lies how it's turned out. A pretty fun and interesting conversation to have. Beyond that, well, yeah, I mean, obviously, thanks for tuning in. And, of course, I wouldn't have a Path of the Jedi show without our shout out. Okay, so this week's shout out goes to a dear friend of mine who I've known now for, man, it's 2022, so a little bit over 7 years. Well, yeah, we're hitting right at 7-year anniversary of our friendship. So I met this individual back when I moved here to the mountains of North Carolina, and it's the craziest story. But like we just moved back from Vegas. We needed a new phone service because our existing phone service was not happening out here. Like there was absolutely no towers, no signal for that particular cell phone service. And so we went into town and to get a new phone and with a new server. And this guy that was helping us was just one of the coolest guys. We connected immediately. He was just so open and friendly, and he seemed to have like a real zest for life and very curious about what we were doing and et cetera, and we just really hit it off from that first time we were talking, we've been friends ever since, right? Come to find out, we had a lot in common from the network marketing standpoint. He has a lot of experience in network marketing. Obviously, I'm a network marketer by career, and so we just hit it off, and we've maintained our friendship even at a long distance for all the years that have gone by so far. I didn't even mention who it was. It's none other than Joseph Lilly, we've had some pretty crazy adventures. Like hung out with him and his wife in Charleston, South Carolina, when they used to live in Charleston. We've spent time with them down at Disney because they have a love for Disney as well. So it's just been really fun to be friends with this individual and his wife Rachel. Obviously, they're really, really dear to me, and I love especially the fact that they've just been there. Right, they've just been there for us, at any time. They've always wanted to maintain connection and maintain the friendship, and they're really, Joe has really been amazing at that, right? And I appreciate that about people because I know I'm not good at it. And really, here's the thing, right? Like that's the other side of the coin. Even as crappy as I am as staying in touch with friends, that's never deterred him from continuing to reach out and anytime that we've reconnected, it's never been like it's always been that we just pick up where we left off, right? The friendship never really takes a pause, so to speak. So it's just I love having these kind of friendships and relationships because it just makes life that much more rich and enjoyable, right? To have these amazing people and their stories and their experiences and their friendship and their love, it just adds so much more color and life to my own experience. And so I just really want to give a shout out to Joe and to Rachel for doing that for me. So without further ado, Joe, this week's shout out goes to you. All right, so that's going to do it for today's episode, guys. Thank you for tuning into the show. If you haven't already liked or subscribed or followed the show, whatever happens to be on the particular app that you're listening on, go ahead and hit the follow, please. More episodes to come. And also, actually, if you would do me this favor, I learned this pretty recently. On my analytics, excuse me, I can't talk today. On my analytics, it only counts actual downloads, right? And I realized that a lot of people just actually stream the episode. So if you are willing, if you do us the favor here for the show, because this would really help us out, go ahead and hit the automatic download. So that way the algorithms and the different platforms see how many downloads are actually happening in the real number, how many people are actually listening to the show. And so that actually helps boost our discoverability as well. On top of course, if you haven't rated and reviewed yet, that I would appreciate a rate and review if that's available on the particular app. But the main thing is, if you could download the episodes as they're released, that would help us out on the show tremendously. Okay, so this is the real end of the episode, guys. Thank you again for tuning in and supporting the show and listening. It's been a real fun conversation with Andor thus far. We're going to talk about Andor episode 3 next week. So until then, guys, be well, be safe, and as always, may the Force be with you. This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company nor Lucasfilm Limited and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.